Hello and welcome to Heroes of the Horn, a Wheel of Time podcast. I am Sir Matt.
And I am Sir Ezra, and we are back with the extended edition, friends. Thanks for supporting us here over on Patreon and Apple Podcast, all those places, YouTube, all that stuff. We are happy to have you here. And Matt, what do we got today? What are we diving into?
Yeah, so again, the TV show is coming up soon here, and just about a month. And I thought we should do the top 10 factions or groups to know before season 1 of the Wheel of Time. As Wheel of Time is a massive fantasy series. It spans 14 books with hundreds, if not thousands of characters, towns, items, powers that all have their own deep lore and history. And all of this is coming to Amazon Prime. Here we go. Season 1 for all of you newbies out there, or just a refresher for sort of series veterans. These are probably going to be the things that you need to kind of know as you enter into season 1. So hopefully this guide can sort of help anybody refresh or learn for the first time. So number 1 here is the Aes Sedai, right? The Aes Sedai, and Aes Sedai never lies, but the truth she speaks may not be the truth you think you hear, right? So it's the Aes Sedai are women who can channel the one power, who've been trained in the White Tower of Tar Valon. They have a vast amount of power and influence over the nations of the world. They serve as advisors to kings and queens. The Aes Sedai belong to one of 7 Ajas, with the exception of their leader, the Amerlin Seat, who is all of the Ajas and none. The Ajas sort of have aspects that go along with them and coincide with a color, red, blue, white, possibly black. And but yeah, so they're pretty much going to be the thing we're going to see right out of the gate. That probably the faction we see right out of the gate with Moiraine, who is obviously going to be sort of our lead for at least season 1. And probably I would say the number 1 group you're going to need to know going into Wheel of Time.
Yeah, and one more thing too, just inside of that group, your full Aes Sedai sister is the top sort of tier, the leader, as Matt said, Amerlin, and right beneath Aes Sedai, you've got the Accepted, who are working their way towards full Aes Sedai, and beneath Accepted you have the Novice. So it's pretty straightforward. It's only like a 3-tier system where they go in and train at Novice, go to Accepted, and then up to Aes Sedai. So pretty awesome. It's kind of our channelers, our Force-sensitive individuals, if you will.
Exactly. And we'll see a lot of our characters will be training as Aes Sedai. Some already are. And that's certainly, you have the one power, right, which is split into 2. And we can do another sort of just novice guide to that as well. And then hopefully by the end, we at least make it to Accepted with our knowledge level here. So, okay. So number 2 is warders. I had to kill a couple of warders. Bad business, that killing warders. Don't like it. It's a good quote from Elias. Maybe perhaps was one. So here we go. So a warder is a person, traditionally male, who's bonded with an Aes Sedai through the use of Saidar, which is the female half of the power, to become her bodyguard and protector. Warders are easily recognized by their distinctive color shifting cloak made of cloth when they choose to wear it. The warder bond was invented after the breaking and has distinct benefits for both parties. The warder gains greater stamina and physical powers, a greater capacity to resist evil, the ability to sense shadow spawn at a distance, and greater resistance to injury. The Aes Sedai, for her part, gains a bodyguard, confidant, and ally in schemes, who is intrinsically, however you pronounce that word, right, linked to her and can be compelled to a certain extent through a bond. Both parties are able to sense the other's general location, physical well-being, and to some extent, emotional state. When an Aes Sedai dies, her warder rarely survives. He completely loses all will to live and will almost always die to avenge his Aes Sedai. A warder's death is nearly as terrible for his Aes Sedai, creating so much emotional turmoil for her that an Aes Sedai can take many years to bond with another. And then, of course, the main character we're going to see as a warder is Lan Mandragoran. We'll see him right in episode 1.
Yeah, and this is a really cool relationship and bond. Something else to kind of be aware of as you go into the show, an Aes Sedai can also bond more than one warder. And you see that sometimes the green Aja tend to be that battle Aja who are bonding more than one warder. A lot of the blues have one, browns mostly one. The red Aja typically does not. They don't necessarily bond as many warders as like your blues and your other Ajas. So it's cool. And as you said, Matt said it, the it's an emotional connection. They can sense one another, and when death happens on one way or the other, it can lead to some major pain and turmoil, and it's worse for the warders who try to avenge their Aes Sedai and will die in the attempt.
Yeah, and we're probably going to see that because it looks like that we saw that in the trailer. So, okay, so number 3 here, and we've actually seen footage of them now and pictures of them now, is the White Cloaks, or otherwise sometimes known as the Children of the Light. So the children have authority wherever the light is, and where the light is not, we bring it. Stain Bornhold, right? Who we saw, right? Or, well, I don't know if we did see him. We saw Jeffrey Bornhold. Did we see?
Yeah, I think he's in there though. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah.
Anywho, the Children of the Light are an independent military organization dedicated to finding dark friends and rooting out evil and corruption wherever it may be found. Their zeal in this endeavor often borders on the insane and makes them dangerous opponents. The headquarters is the Fortress of the Light in the city of Amador in Amadecia. Although Amadecia has a king, the children have so much political and military power that they are undoubtedly its true rulers. They typically refer to themselves as the children. They're commonly referred to this by others as white cloaks due to their snowy white cloaks worn over armor, which is the most distinguishable feature of their uniform and the aspect that makes them easy to instantly identify. This is not a name favored by the children themselves, and they often don't like it used when it's in their presence.
Yeah, again, they're the Children of the Light, and when they're called White Cloaks, it's almost kind of a slight, if you will. But my gosh, by the light, my friend, they will find a dark friend, okay? They'll find more than one normally. They might even find a whole village full of them. These are really interesting, unique individuals. And again, they're fighting for the light, and their whole kind of role is to root out dark friends and those who work for the shadow. So
right. I would describe them as, when you think about like Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like chaotic good, right? They're the kind of people who are like, oh, we will purge a city to make sure that it adheres to the light. Yeah. So sometimes it seems like they could actually do some things that are almost even viewed as villainous because they're doing it in the name of the light. So then on the other side here, this is where we start to get into the other side as the Dark Friends. Mm-hmm. So the Dark Friends, also known as the Athan Shadar, people of the shadow, which is how they're known among the Seanchan, and the shadow runners among the Aiel, are humans who have been tempted with promises of immortality or power by the Dark One or by other Dark Friends into serving the shadow. They refer to themselves as Friends of the Dark rather than Dark Friends, which is also what they're typically known at, and this was all created during the collapse and the War of Power. Although the Black Aja can sometimes be considered to be Dark Friends, the vast majority of Dark Friends can't channel.
Yes. And here's the thing. I think one of the coolest dynamics for the show, and as you go into it and you're watching it and you're looking for who's this person, what faction are they related to, look out for this category, because Dark Friends, who is it? We don't know, right? They could be just this casting for one episode where they're just someone who's at the bar in and around our main host, help them. Maybe they take their horse back to the stable and they're just sort of readying or grooming the horse in some way. They turn around, pull out a dagger, and they're a dark friend with some sort of command to kill one of our main characters. It's a wild card. I love the idea of this in the story, and you got to watch out. Literally, there are a ton of Dark Friends, so watch out.
Yes, Absolutely. And so then that moves us to our next one here, which is the Forsaken. So the Dark One and the Forsaken are bound in Shale Ghul, bound by the Creator at the moment of creation, bound until the end of time. Well, maybe they're not so bound anymore, because we will definitely see them. So think about this. You've almost got you have the Darkfriends, and then we talked about how, like, in the Aes Sedai, you have, like, Novice, then you've got Accepted, then you've got the Aes Sedai. Well, the Forsaken are about as high as you can get without being the Dark One himself. Okay?
Yep.
So the Forsaken are channelers who serve the side of the shadow in the War of who served the side of the shadow in the War of Power. These were known as the Chosen to rule the world. So sometimes they will be referred to as the Chosen, right? Although during the War of Power, there were dozens of Forsakens leading the armies of the Shadow. As time has passed, the term Forsaken is actually what they've came to be referred to as only the 13 of the most powerful among them. Right? The horrific deeds that each of them are remembered for long and after their disappearance. These 13 were such infamous symbols of the Shadow that mothers would use stories to frighten their children, right? And these they can use the power, right? There's male and female. Forsaken. These are serious players when they step on the stage.
Yeah, so we've mentioned the Aes Sedai, and we've talked about that faction, and they can wield the one power. But friends, the Forsaken are on a whole nother level. All right, there's only 13. They're the most powerful. They have been imprisoned. They have been imprisoned for 3,000 years. They're super old, Age of Legends stuff. They know things that these Aes Sedai could never understand. They are so immensely powerful that it's wild. When they step on the screen or we see one of them, the speculation on who is a member of the Forsaken is going to be huge. It's one of the biggest things in the show I think we're going to be looking for. Is that person this Forsaken, or... they can do things, Matt, with the power where they can literally change their face and they're like, it's wild. The stuff they can do with casting on this is going to be amazing. But that faction is one to pay attention to. The 13 Forsaken, and they work for the Shadow. They work for the Dark One, and the Darkfriends report to them, right? So they have Darkfriends showing up reporting to them. It's awesome. It's crazy.
It's crazy. Okay, so number 6. Now we're going to totally shift gears into just some sort of different. These are just people we'll see different sort of groups. But those, I would say, those first 5 are like the big players we need to know. And now it's going to be some of these smaller factions we'll run into from time to time. So number 6, the Tuatha'an, who are also sometimes referred to as the Tinkers, right? I will find the song, or another will find the song, but the song will be sung this year or in a year to come. As it once was, so shall it be again, without world end. It's a Tuatha'an farewell, right? So they're sort of a nomadic people who live in brightly painted wagons and live by a pacifist philosophy known as the Way of the Leaf. Sometimes people call them tinkers. Other people refer to them as traveling people. So they kind of really just travel the land in sort of camps. They practice this really pacifist way of the leaf, and it will cause some of our characters, when they run across them, to sort of question their own philosophy of life and stuff. And I always like them when we meet up with the Tuatha'an. Just different. Yeah. It's just a different way.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. They represent like an innocence, and they stand out. They boldly stand out. You can clearly tell that they walk in a different manner, a different way of life, the way of the leaf. And it's interesting to kill one of them, or to attack them or harass them in some ways, to harass an innocent. It's just not. It's very frowned upon, and so when we see them harassed, I think it's going to make the audience kind of feel like, gosh, they're just a peaceful people. What's with this kind of harassment? It's their way of life that kind of sets people like, oh, should I be more like that? Am I too violent in my nature and behavior? So it's an interesting group that we'll definitely see in the show. We've seen, I think, their wagons, and we've seen like a circled group of tinkers. So
yeah, absolutely. So then, really, to go on the other direction, here we go. We're going to talk about number 7 here, the Aiel. Till shade is gone, till water is gone, into the shadow with teeth bared, screaming defiance with the last breath, to spit into Sightbinder's eye on the last day. That is the Aiel's oath, right? So they're a race that live between sort of the wetlanders, right? Which is, if you look at the map, right, and the westlands, right, which is sort of this, you have our main sort of area, then to the west it's desert, right? And so they sort of live in this mountain range, more so on the desert side. So that's known as the Aiel Waste, right? So they've earned reputation as exceptionally skilled warriors, although not really much is known about them, right? They can almost immediately be recognized as they are typically tall, have pale eyes and light-colored hair, as well as wear pretty distinctive clothing. So again, think sort of this sort of desert warrior tribe, and I mean, yeah, without trying to go too far into spoilers, because this episode so far has been kind of spoiler free. You're probably going to see one.
Yeah,
you're definitely going to see one. But they'll play a big role in, I think, season 2 going forward.
Yeah, and Matt, the other thing too, when you start the series, the book series, this is hinted at. It won't surprise me if in the beginning of season 1 they reference the Aiel War right out the gate, right. And they'll talk about this group of people that you might not see, but you will hear about them, and you'll hear kind of how our realm is dealing with the after effects or the aftermath of that war and the consequences in it. So it seems a little distant right now as we start season 1, but definitely we're going to hear rumors of them, and we're going to see, it sounds like we're going to see more. I think we're going to see more than one. So
yeah, maybe. Okay, well, let's move to number 8, which is Gleeman. So there's really one Gleeman we know we're going to see, and that's like going to be like within the first 5 minutes of season 1, it seems yeah. like. That is Tom Maryland. So a Gleeman is an entertainer, right? They often travel between towns and villages, and they're typically, they're storytellers, they're acrobatic, they usually wear a cloak that has like a sort of fancy multicolored cloak. I don't think we're getting that this season just from the pictures we've seen. But they're pretty typically musically inclined as well. They'll play like a flute or a harp. Kind of a bard, I think, is really kind of the best way to describe them. So Gleemen are allowed to go anywhere they wish, as nearly all commoners delight, or at least, tolerate their presence. The Aiel only allows Gleemen, tinkers, and peddlers to cross the spine of the world. So even the Aiel are fine with them. So...
And that's a really interesting point there, to connect your Gleemen, your tinkers, and then peddlers, which we is just kind of
sort of your merchants, right?
Traveling merchant.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Aiel see them as people who are peaceful people who cause no threat, and they also provide a service. They're entertaining. The tinkers, going back to them as well, they are they help repair stuff and things like that. So that they're people in service and in labor, but our Gleemen are in the entertainment business, my friend. And I think it's awesome. You go into a tavern, you go in and you get you a drink. They're reciting old stories. They're playing songs. They're juggling, playing the flute and the harp and so on. So it is cool. I think we'll see. We know for a fact we'll see Tom Maryland, but I'm hoping we see more of them traveling in and out of different places and get some songs and some good music from our Gleeman in season 1.
Absolutely. So number 9 is going to be kind of actually be sort of 2, I think, in a way. And that is Ogier. And then I guess we'll talk a little bit about Cloaks as well. So the blessing of light and stillness be on you. That is an Ogier blessing, right? So they are a race of non-human creatures who have an intense love of knowledge and peace, right? Also known as a lantern or tree brothers by the Aiel. They're great architects and stonemasons, and they're actually responsible for most of the impressive structures around the world, right? They love to grow plants, and there's not really, honestly, a lot known about them. They're sort of this race that has been around for a very long time. Now, for the people in, I guess, our modern or current day, in Wheel of Time, they actually are often mistaken for Trollocs because they stand about 8 feet tall. They have broad noses, wide mouths, long tufted ears. They can even sometimes have sort of like tusks a little bit, right? And that's sort of what we see with Trollocs, who are sort of if you're coming to this for the first time, they're kind of like your standard orc. That's who we're going to see as often as a lot as sort of the bad guy that we're going to be fighting a lot. So Ogier can sort of be mistaken for them a little bit.
Yeah, in your Ogier, they almost remind me too of if you're familiar with Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, you had the Ents in Treebeard who kind of were caretakers of nature and more connected to nature in that way. So the Ogier are definitely that, and the Trollocs are just the opposite, destruction and whatnot.
Right.
So it's interesting too that the main one that we'll see, Loyal, is I think he's young for an Ogier, right? He's 80 to 90 years old, and we think that's pretty old, but for them, that's very young. So they do live a long time.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So that was kind of two Trollocs, again, who's going to serve as their sort of main people. We're going to that's sort of, we'll see them in armies, and that's who we're going to be fighting against a lot of the time. But then the Ogier as well. So they're sort of different. They usually live in small groups in steadings, right? And they know how to use a lot of the mysterious. We see this on the poster. You see this thing called a waygate, and they kind of know how to use it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So interesting about the Ogier. Inside of a steading, the one power cannot be reached or touched. To think of like a shield, an overarching shield, where you enter there and your Aes Sedai or Forsaken or whoever, they can't touch the source or the one power. So that'll be interesting to use in the series and see how it's used. But yeah, you're right. They had the ways. And then again, that steading is a place where they go and they can kind of recharge and they need to be near it. They live in those groups because there's something about the steading that keeps them alive and gives them life and energy. So
yeah. Okay, and then we're gonna finish with this one here. I don't know how much of this we'll actually see in season 1, but certainly season 2 and going forward, they will play a very, very important role, and that is the Seanchan. Right? It's an empire that's actually located to sort of the far west. Excuse me. Yeah. I said the Aiel are actually east as you go. As you go that way. They refer to as the Westerland, so it's just kind of the map. But so the Seanchan sort of live on this island really on sort of the east, and they come over quite a bit. But what makes them sort of interesting is that they are trying to reclaim this continent, right? And they're calling it the Return. And they actually do some things that are pretty interesting here. So you have the Domani, right? Who are women who can channel are regarded by the Seanchan as animals and are kept on a silvery metal leash known as an Adam, which actually controls their channeling by a trainer known as a Suldam. Right? And they refer to them as the leashed ones. That's what Domani stands for. So they're going to sort of serve as villains to our Aes Sedai because they don't like them, and they want to sort of have them as pets. Really, is how they kind of use them. So yeah, you have the Domani, you have the Suldam, right? That's the trainer, right? Is a Suldam, meaning leash holder in the old tongue. And then you have the Adam, which is that necklace that they use. And so they come over, they're going to wage wars, right? And they're a big player in a lot of the conflict that's happening in the Wheel of Time.
Yeah, for sure. It's a whole empire, it's a whole group of people that they believe they're coming back to reclaim what is theirs in this return. And on the surface, okay, it's just another warring group coming in, but you look a little closer as we interact with them in the series, there's a dark side to this group of people who don't like the one power, or they try to control it. Maybe those who can't channel with the Suldam and the Adam, and leashing channelers, if you will, and putting them in a position of servitude. So it's a darker kind of aspect to the series, but they definitely are a group that you're going to want to know about. And as Matt said, I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's rumor of them as well. As I said with the Aiel, you might not see a lot of it, but you might hear rumor of it. That's the big thing in Wheel of Time. It's such a big world that to make the connections, you got to pay close attention to the rumors and the news that's coming into different world leaders. So.
Right. Certainly season 2, but maybe late season 1 we start to hear them or maybe see some. But certainly season 2, like beginning of season 2, they're going to play a role. But then it's also sort of just interesting to think that we have, because we're going to see how powerful the Aes Sedai are in season 1, and just know that there's a group out there, there's a warring sort of faction that's going to be coming over that we don't use the one power, but we have a way to defeat the one power in a way. So
yeah,
interesting. So that's just sort of a quick little guide here to some of these factions that most of those factions we're definitely going to see the last sort of 2 there. Maybe we don't see them season 1, but they'll certainly probably be referenced. And we might sort of end of season 1 begin to see some of them coming in. Just depends on really how far we get into season 1, but the rest certainly we will see with the Aes Sedai and everything. And so just sort of a quick refresher or a quick kind of guide as to what we're going to see in season 1.
Yeah, and Matt, this was cool. So Matt was kind of pulling together some of these factions. I as soon as you did this, I wanted to say there are so many, like, how do you narrow down the factions? There's so many. What I love about Wheel of Time is the characters, the regions, the places, the settings, these factions, these groups, and there's so many. So leave us a comment, send us, a message, and let us know if you want us to do a follow-up and kind of go through a few more of them, because there's so many, and it's important just to get kind of a general understanding of what the groups are. And I think knowing the channelers and the bigger groups here helps you understand the pieces that are going to be moving around, vying for power and control.
Because there's factions inside of factions. But I think this, at least certainly for season 1, is sort of here's an overarching guide for what we're going to be sort of seeing.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, again, leave us a comment down below on YouTube there. Send us a pigeon if you want to see more of these or whatever, and we'll come back with a breakdown of more of this stuff. Things you got to get ready for here in Season 1. But, friends, thanks again for supporting us here on Apple Podcast, on YouTube, on Patreon, all that good stuff. You guys are awesome. And with that, as always, remember, the grave is no bar to our call.